All right. Well, I'm just very, very happy to be here today, everyone, so I just want you to know that. And also, I want you to know sort of my life motto before we begin, because otherwise what I'm going to tell you might seem like it's out of context and maybe doesn't matter as much, but it all does tie together. So who here knows what the Westminster Shorter Catechism says? Anyone? The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's the chief end of human beings. And if that's true, then I want to do everything that I can to both make that true for myself and make that true for as many other people as possible. So, what I'm going to talk about today is along those lines. So first of all, I want to say, if I were to ask you, and I don't want to see a show of hands necessarily, but if I were to ask you if you love your life, if you enjoy your life, I would probably get a decent show of hands, at least half of you, and maybe all of you because you didn't want to seem like you're depressed or something. But if I were to ask you, how many of you enjoy your existence? I wonder how many of you would raise your hands or even know what that means. The distinction between those two questions is very important, and that's what I'm going to be working toward sharing with you today. All right. So the title of today's presentation, Tapping into Peace and Joy by Being Present. So this is not a typical presentation about how to prioritize better or how to say no more often or how to think positive thoughts necessarily. Instead, I am going to give you a pretty radical way of rethinking how you do life. You've heard of unconditional love, I'm sure. And so what I want to talk about today is the idea of unconditional peace and unconditional joy. So let's look at the next slide, and I'll just give you an idea of a quick little rundown of what we're going to be covering. All right. We're going to be talking about why people don't experience joy and peace as often as is possible. We're going to be talking about how your personality comes into play. And we're going to be talking about practical steps to begin to live in a place of greater peace and joy. So this isn't all just theoretical, all right? I'm going to give you a toolkit that you can begin to use immediately. But first I want to do a little bit of vision casting of what it's possible to live like if you have peace and joy and live from that place. People who live in joy and in peace are not in a hurry very often. They don't live with that constant scurry and mental chatter that most of us have all the time. They're not troubled by the circumstances of life that usually infuriate or frustrate the rest of us. And they don't ride that roller coaster of emotions that direct most people's existence. They're able to handle what comes to them with calm and with wisdom. Doesn't that sound awesome? Are you thinking, oh, that could never be me? Well, I am here to tell you that is not the case. It is within every human being's grasp, and it's called the art of being present. All right, so I'm going to tell you a statement right now, and I believe it's the first thing on your handout for those of you who are interested. And it's going to sound like a no-duh statement, but then I'm going to explain it some more, okay? All right, so here's the no-duh statement. You are alive every moment of your life. You want to do the next slide? Thank you, Captain Obvious. Okay, but here's what I mean by that. You are alive every moment, not just the ones that are going your way, not just the ones that you're looking forward to, okay? You're alive every one of those moments that you are here on this earth. You are alive every moment that you are having an argument with your husband. You are alive every moment that you are in a traffic jam. You are alive every moment that someone is hurting your feelings or taking credit for your work or any of those things that particularly wound you or make you angry. But what if you could be perfectly at peace and filled with joy in the midst of that traffic jam? Even though you know that that traffic jam is going to make you late for work, or make you miss an important meeting, or complicate your life in some other way. I'm telling you that it is possible. You can learn to fully acknowledge and inhabit and have peace in every moment of your life. That's called being present. Or you can do what most people do, right? They check out, they get angry, honk their horns, say things they regret later, check their smartphones. That's a whole other talk. Find some way to distract yourself until you arrive at what in your mind is a more pleasant moment. But with the information that I'm going to give you today, from now on you're going to be able to choose how you're going to encounter life. You can decide whether you're going to continue to, argue with reality and resist what happens in your life, or you can step up to this fuller and richer life of greater joy and peace by actually experiencing all of your life. It's a choice, and you get to make it. All right? So, here we have arguing with reality. And when you don't argue with reality, you don't need to be angry or frustrated because you're not resisting anything. Resisting doesn't change anything anyway, right? It doesn't make the traffic go faster. It doesn't make the mean person suddenly become nicer to you. It's just wasted effort. We have this idea in our heads that by resisting what's happening, we can change it, and that's almost never true. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life of an opportunity that I had to freak out or to not argue with reality. In preparation for coming here today, I was finishing up an audio program, and I wanted to have it available today if people wanted it. Well, I had worked really diligently to finish the recordings and to clean up the recordings, worked with a designer to get the cover done and all that sort of stuff. Well, I went away for Christmas for about 8 days, saw 2 different sets of families in 2 different states, came back, and a few hours after we got home, the power went out. Well, we live in the woods, and so we know this happens, and so we had a generator. So the next morning, my husband powered up the generator and went off to work, and I thought, oh good, now I'll get online, and I'll get in touch with my fulfillment center, I'll get in touch with my designer, and we'll make our final arrangements. And the modem wouldn't work. Can't get on the internet. Okay, all right, so I went and found the modem connection, found its power source, figured out why it wasn't working, got it to work. All right, here we go. So now I'm online and I'm doing my emails, and I find out from my fulfillment center representative that the original deadline of January 2nd to have my materials in was no longer going to work because the company was going to be shut down and everyone would have the day off. So this was December 31st. So I then realized, oh, I need to mail you the masters today of my audio program. So I finished cleaning up the masters, got them all recorded, tested them, made sure that the CDs worked, all that sort of thing. Put them in an envelope, went down to the mailbox, or the post office rather, and the post office was closed because they closed early because it's December 31st, New Year's Eve. Okay, so I get back in my car, I go home, I call the post office in the next town down. They're also closed already. But an actual person picked up the phone and told me, oh, this other post office in the next town over is open for another hour. Okay, so I get back in my car, I drive 2 towns over, go to the post office, stand in line, mail my packages. I paid extra to have it expedited so that the masters were assured to arrive there on Monday. All this time, I could have been freaking out. I could have made the choice to argue with reality and say, this should not be happening, this isn't fair, this is frustrating, this is irritating, and decide to be angry about it. Instead, I decided that I would just accept what is, all these crazy little glitches in a row, and I would just do what I could, whatever was within my power, and leave the rest to God. All right? And that's what I did. Well, as it turns out, the expedited shipping did not work. And I think the masters arrived Wednesday instead of Monday, a full week after I mailed them, and I wasted my money on the expedited shipping. But that too is a thing that I cannot control, and I just can decide to let it go instead of being angry about it. You can choose to continue to be angry about things that you have no control over, but I just don't recommend it because it doesn't really do any good in the long run. All right. So let's go ahead. Oh, and I just want to say, too, that my normal tendency is to freak out. My normal tendency is that my brain goes 1,000 miles a minute, and that I am very much someone who makes things happen and gets things done. And it is not at all my natural way of being to be calm and peaceful in situations like this. So just to let you know, it's not just my personal, my personality bent that enabled me to have peace in the midst of all that craziness. All right, so yeah, let's look at the next slide now. I'm not necessarily recommending these books. I'm just showing you that these are some of the most popular and well-known books about the concept of dealing with being present. Be here now, the naked now, the power of now. Why is this a popular topic? Well, it's because most of us are not here now. We're in the future, we're in the past, we're thinking about other things. And so I want to talk now about what that actually means to be present. I've said it several times, but what does that actually mean? Well, it means not living in the past with all of its failures and memories and frustrations and regrets. It's not living in the future where you're projecting all kinds of hopes and assumptions and fears as well. We spend a lot of time in places that don't actually exist. The past doesn't exist anymore, and the future hasn't happened yet. And in fact, the future never does happen because all that ever happens is right now. Our bodies only can exist in one place, and that is right now. Our minds try to time travel and go all over the place, but that is not the nature of reality. All right? So, being present means directly experiencing life as it is unfolding. It means dwelling, at least internally, in this kind of lovely, timeless now, and approaching each situation with all the resources that our spirits already possess. So, what keeps us from being present then, if it's such a wonderful thing? It is a fundamental imbalance of our soul and our spirit. So with that, let's talk now about the makeup of human beings, right? I'm sure you've all heard that phrase, body, mind, spirit, or body, soul, spirit. I'm sure you've also heard of the body-mind connection, which is a very real thing. So let's just talk about what each of those things mean. So the body, of course, that's an easy one. That's the physical stuff that our souls and spirits walk around in, what gets us through life on earth. The spirit, then, let's talk about that. That's the eternal part of you. That's the part that's made in the image of God. It can never be damaged or diminished, and you can never lose it, although we lose touch with it. That's the distinction. It is your essence. It's your essential nature. It's the truest part of you. It's whole, it's peaceful, it's compassionate, it's joyful, and as I said earlier, it contains all the resources that you need to function on this earth with wisdom and love and without fear. So let's look at the next slide, and we're going to talk about the soul. Anybody here read Watchman Nee? He's a fantastic, fantastic thinker and Christian author. I really recommend his books. He explains the soul in this way. It is comprised of the mind, the will, and the emotions. So this is where all your thinking happens. All right, this is where you make judgments about yourself and other people. This is where you have opinions and preferences and desires. This is where your decision making happens. And this is where you get your feelings hurt, where you get offended, where you get angry or jealous, and so on. The soul is really the base camp for your personality. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. And I just want to say that your personality is not you. And I know that that's a little strange to hear, so I'm going to try to break it down. So please bear with me. I know this is very different from what you may be used to hearing about in terms of what personality is. I have to be brief for the sake of time, so I'm just going to try to encapsulate this concept for you. I've taken 2 week-long seminars on personality, and I'm going to take 2 more in the next couple of years. It's a very complicated and complex entity. So I'm just going to try to tell you in a couple sentences what's going on here. The human mind forms the personality as a result of humans gradually losing contact with that part of ourselves that is true, our spirits. Okay? Psychologists and psychiatrists agree pretty much that by the time you're about 4 years old, your personality has been formed. It happens to every human being. Okay? If you're a human, you got a personality. That's just the way it is. And you're always going to have it once you have it. It is a particular and very limiting view of the world and of how you're supposed to be in the world. The personality, it helps you avoid danger. It helps you learn the social rules of conduct, all sorts of useful things to help you navigate the world and be accepted in the world. But it's not ultimately who you are. So the problem is that most of us are convinced that we are our personality because we've lived with it so long and we hear it telling us what to do our whole lives, and so we just assume that that's who we are. And also we've never been told any different. So we just make that assumption. So I know, that this, like I said, is a bit of a paradigm shift for a lot of you. I know that this is not something you usually hear, so I'm just hoping that you realize if there's any resistance in you right now, going like, oh, that's not true, that's weird, that's probably your personality doing its best to try to keep you safe. It's trying to help you in a misguided way to not accept things that don't match up with its version of reality. So I just do hope that you'll hear me out, okay? All right, so now let's go back to the soul. The mind is where we acquire and store knowledge, right? And the will is what we use to make decisions and take actions. And emotions are reactions that are created by our minds or our personalities, right? I can use those words interchangeably here. And those reactions come in response to things that happen in the outside world, right? So I've been talking about joy, but what's the difference between happiness and joy? Happiness is an emotion. Happiness is a response to what happens around me. So if I get what I want for Christmas, I'm happy. If I don't get what I want for Christmas, I'm not happy. If I win the argument, I'm happy. If I don't win the argument, I'm not happy. You see how that works? It's all about what's going on outside of yourself. So, in essence, if my demands on reality are not met, then I cannot be happy. So the word emotion is an interesting word. It comes from the Latin root meaning to agitate. That's not a positive word. Have you ever heard someone say, oh, I'm so agitated today? No, it's a negative word. It's not a good thing. We're so used to living by our emotions and letting them dictate our lives and our mood, but there is something better. And joy is an example of that something better. It's a state of being, and that's on your outline as well. It is completely independent of what is going on in the outside world. It has nothing to do with your expectations or your demands on reality. We were designed by God to live from our spirits. This is the conclusion I have come to. But we mostly live from our souls or from our personalities. So if you're willing, I'd love you to do this with me. Take one of your hands and make it into a fist. Take the other hand and open it up wide and cover up the fist. Okay. Your fist is your spirit. Your other hand is your soul. It just ends up covering up that essential part of you, who you truly are. And that's why it takes some work to sort of uncover your spirit, your authentic self. Okay? So if we're living mainly from our souls or our minds or our personalities, then we're living with a bunch of emotions because they come from the mind, right? So here's a radical thought. Since we were designed to live from our spirits, maybe we're not supposed to have emotions at all. Maybe instead we were designed to live in those states of being that are constants and that they reflect our true nature and the nature of God that is already deposited inside us. That is not to say we are God, don't get me wrong. That is to say we are made in the image and likeness of God, and that He deposits His Holy Spirit in us, and so that we have already inside of us all of those beautiful characteristics and resources that God has given to us. David Alsobrook is a wonderful speaker and author. I have one of his books in the back to show you. And he writes in the book, You Can Be Free from Yourself, which I highly recommend. Love, joy, and peace are not positive emotions, as is often believed. They are deeper than emotions. They are states of being. All right, so let's look at the next slide. There we go. There's the personality in action. So every time you get embarrassed or offended, go ahead and keep clicking. Remember, this is the one that just is a little bit animated. Every time you get offended or angry, you're acting from your personality. These are your emotions, and they arise because your personality feels threatened, okay? Because your identity is being questioned. And if your identity is based on your personality and someone is kind of threatening that personality, then you have no choice but to defend it, right? Because what are you if you're not your personality? Right? If you don't know any different, then that's a scary thought, and your natural reaction is going to be, oh, I must defend this thing that I think I am. Oh, you can go back to the last one, actually, if you would. All right, so when someone says something to me and my initial reaction is, oh, that hurts my feelings. What I can do now is realize, oh, that just hurt the part of me that feels like it needs to defend itself. That just hurt the part of me that's not even real. And because of that, I'm able to very quickly just let go of whatever that thing was that that person just said to me or did to me. And most of the time, people don't even realize that what they're saying or doing is hurting your false self. They have no idea. So that's what I do now. I can really process these things very quickly and let them go, because I understand that they can never affect my essential nature. It is unchangeable. It's unassailable. There's no way that it can ever be harmed or taken away from me. Okay, so now we can go to the next slide. Have you ever heard of personality conflicts? Have you ever heard someone say, or even say yourself, oh, our personalities just clash? Well, that's exactly true. That is exactly what's going on. Because there are no essence clashes. Right? If every one of us was living from our essential self, from our true nature, then there would be no conflict. But that's not the world that we live in, is it? No, it is not. Although, if more people lived with a greater awareness of their true selves, there would be a tremendous amount less of conflict. So, when you think about someone that you don't like, or someone that you don't get along with very well, or someone who you clash with quite a bit, if there is such a person in your life, and if you are human, that is quite possibly the case. All right. Realize that what's happening is that your personality shell smacking up against someone else's personality shell. And what your personality is doing is defending you, what it thinks is you, and saying, oh no, that's not me. I am not like that. That is a bad way of being. Or that way of being threatens the way of being that you should be. So you need to stay away from them. That's actually what's happening. A coaching client told me about someone who had hurt her. And it was unintentional, but it hurt her nonetheless. And so I said, well, what do you plan to do about that? She said, well, I think I'm going to just sit for a while and really figure out what I need to say and how I need to explain it. And then I'm going to find the right time, when we're alone, and I'm going to approach the person and just explain to them, why what they did hurt me. And I said, oh, or you can just realize that the part of you that got hurt is not real. And she just went, oh. So ultimately, the tools that I'm going to give you today are going to enable you to realize that no one is responsible for hurting your feelings. It's within our power to just take a step back and remember our true selves and to let go of whatever comes our way. All right? All right, next slide. I'm going to talk about the toolkit. And it's not every tool that exists, but it's a couple of tools that are really, really helpful. And they're tools that I practice every day and that I recommend you try implementing every day as well. Okay. All right, the first is detaching, learning to detach. This is another word for not arguing with reality, okay? And I know I can hear people in their brain say, oh, but it's hard to detach. Well, it is, we want things. There are things that we want in the world. It doesn't mean that you can't want anything. It means that you need to quit attaching your happiness or your fulfillment or whatever else to the thing that you want. That's a huge difference. We are not content in this world, and we tend to want a lot of things that aren't necessarily good for us or that we don't really actually need, because we have become convinced that what will give us joy and happiness and peace and all of those good states of being lie somewhere out there. But that is not the case. If you're able to realize that all the things that you already want and need are already inside you, it's much easier to detach. So as a daily practice, you want to learn to recognize anytime you're agitated, frustrated, impatient, and particularly any time that you complain. Those are all signs that you are arguing with reality. And so in those moments, just take a breath and see if you can detach from the expectation or the outcome that you have in your mind. I guarantee you it's going to give you a lot more peace. All right, stillness. That's the next thing. This is not a thing we are good at. This is not something that is valued in our culture, right? Have you ever heard the phrase, the devil's idle hands are the devil's workshop? I would say the opposite. Busy, busy hands are the devil's workshop. We have the opportunity in our culture to be occupied every second of our day. check the smartphone, send an email. Oh, look at all the on-demand entertainment that's available to us. Oh, look at all the hobbies that we can do. There is just an unending supply of things that are available to distract us and to prevent us from being still and quiet. But stillness and quiet is what God calls us to, right? God said, be still and know that I am God. He didn't say, run around like a crazy person all day long and know that I am God, right? You cannot know anyone with that kind of wild relationship where you don't hardly ever acknowledge them and are never quiet and are never paying attention to them, right? So stillness is an essential component of knowing God, and it's an essential component of knowing your actual self. If you can learn to be still and quiet every day, you will begin to actually reconnect with your essential self. You will begin to connect with the peace, the joy, the wholeness, the compassion that are already inside you. Just a process of uncovering, right? I call this the self-archaeology toolkit, because you are digging down through all the personality layers to your actual true self. So, we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to try this just for a couple moments. If you are willing, I'd love it if you would close your eyes just for a moment, and if you're able, put both feet on the ground, because it helps you to be, as they say, grounded. All right? And all you have to do is focus on your breath. Focus on the feel of it coming in and going out of your body. And even listen to the sound of it. You're not praying. You're not necessarily trying to think of anything. Just give that a try a couple times. All right, go ahead and open your eyes again. I recommend that you start doing this 10 minutes a day. People who have not practiced this before find it excruciating to do it more than 10 minutes because it is not our natural bent, right? We are told to produce, produce, produce. It's one of the things that made our culture great. It's also one of the things that's destroying our culture, the lack of peace and stillness and quiet. Okay. This is more difficult for certain people than others. It was terrifying for me when I first started because my brain is so used to being busy and occupied and full of ideas that when I shut that off, it feels like this horrible void. Others of you, that felt fantastic and amazing, and hooray for you. Keep doing that. Just know that everyone has a different experience initially, and notice that it's very difficult to turn your thoughts off. We're so used to constantly having our minds filled with thoughts and ideas and assumptions and so many things that to actually try to stop that process, it's quite difficult. So this takes practice, but it's worth it. So there's the second tool. Third tool, awareness. Bring more attention to your everyday life. In other words, you want to turn off autopilot. I'm sure we've all had the experience of driving, and you're driving along and suddenly you realize, wow, I'm several miles further down the road than last time I was aware that I was driving. That happens to everybody because we just go on autopilot, right? There's certain things we know how to do. They don't require a whole huge amount of attention, and so we just do them thoughtlessly, okay? So what I want to recommend to you is finding something in your day that you do routinely, that you normally don't even think about, and really give it your full attention. I do something called aware toothbrushing. And so I get my Sonicare toothbrush, right, that's set for 2 minutes, and I turn it on, I close my eyes, and I try to focus on the sound that the toothbrush is making as it goes through my mouth. I try to really feel what the sensation is of that toothbrush touching my gums and my teeth, and be really present to that whole experience. So that's one thing that you can do. I have a coaching client who does aware face washing. You can do it with chopping vegetables or driving or putting your socks on, whatever, a thing that normally you'd pay no mind to. Give it your full attention, and you will find out that it really transforms your experience of life, because you are living every one of those moments, and you will find a really amazing richness in everything that you do. It adds a whole different quality of attention and of life to just the most mundane things, and it enhances your quality of life. It's quite fantastic. So I just want to finish by saying, if you're willing to do the daily work and willing to feel a little uncomfortable sometimes, because sometimes what comes up is not very comfortable for you as you're being still and quiet especially, there are all kinds of wonderful benefits. And so let's move on to the next slide, and we'll just run through these bullets very quickly. You will have better relationships. You will stop demanding that other people adhere to your demands on reality, and you will begin to have more compassion for them, and you won't get hurt and offended as much by their imperfect attempts to love you. You will have more peace because you are allowing what is, and you're not fighting and resisting all the things that come into your life. You will have more joy because, again, you're not in this constant state of anger and turmoil over what actually exists. You'll have more fulfillment in everyday things. As I was saying, you can have like amazing experiences brushing your teeth. It's pretty fantastic. And chopping vegetables, I love it so much now. It's just amazing. And you can even get to a point where you relish and savor your very existence. You know, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, how many of you love your existence? And you can get to that point where you really feel completely alive, and it's a beautiful feeling. So I just threw a lot of information at you, I know. I hope some of you took notes, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have after this is over. I'll be over there at that back table. I have an audio program that I just finished. It goes into much greater detail about the personality types. It's called Know Yourself to Know God. That's available as well. I brought some books with me that are fantastic that I really recommend. I did not write them, and I'm not selling them. I just want you to see them so that you can get a feel for what they're like. And with that, I just really appreciate your attention so much today, and I wish you a new year of greater peace and joy and presence than ever before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Real quick, are there any questions for Lee? Does anybody have a question about what she just talked about? Lily?
I have a question. I didn't really understand the difference between soul and spirit.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let me try to explain that again then. So the soul is the part of you that's sort of compensating for the loss of connection with your spirit. Okay, so human beings have brains, right? We have minds. That's just the way that we're made. But again, the thought is that we were designed to live from our spirits. That's where God's image is in us. That's where his all of his good stuff that he gives us resides. And so, if we could live from that place, we wouldn't need a personality or a soul. Okay, so what happens is that as we get older, you know, just even the first few years of our life, and we experience disappointment and hurt in just very even small ways, we begin to lose connection with that essential part of ourselves, our spirits. And so then our mind takes over and says, oh, I can fix it. I don't want you to feel, so scared. I'll make some rules for you. I'll set some things in place. And that's what our personality becomes, and that's what lives in the soul part of us, our mind, will, emotions. Okay?
I just thought soul and spirit were one and the same.
Right, that's a problem of labeling that happens a lot, especially within the church. Those words sometimes get used interchangeably, and sometimes people think of the soul as the thing that gets saved, or the soul as the thing that goes to heaven at the end of our lives on earth. So what I should just make that distinction. I should have made it at the beginning, actually, that yeah, the way that I'm talking about it, the spirit is the eternal part of us, and the soul is not necessarily.
But doesn't the Bible talk about our soul going up?
Right, so that's what I'm saying. It's just a difference in nomenclature. It's just, giving labels to various things. So in most of the reading that I have done by Christian authors, the distinction they make is one between what is considered the spirit, the eternal part, and the soul, which is not necessarily. Okay? Okay. Yes.
What's the difference between Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, because I read that one, and then The Power of Now? Is it the same but just a different title, or?
So that I'm not sure about. I'm reading The Power of Now right now, actually, and while of course I don't agree with his theology, I think that what he has to say about being present is fantastic. And so for that reason, I recommend that book. Just with the caveat, as a Christian, chew up the meat, spit out the bones, take his ideas about reincarnation with a grain of salt and fling them away. But I haven't read A New Earth yet. I have it, but I haven't read it, so yeah, I'm not sure.
I did read it with a permanent marker and cut across the things on the highlighted other things.
There you go. That's what you do. That's how you do it. Yep. All right. Anything else? Yes.
So you're saying that personality is what shapes you. Your events in your life that has shaped you, that given you the personality.
Right.
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 Okay.
Yeah. There's a nurture aspect involved as well, and that's what determines your level of emotional health in the world. But there's that other aspect of the things that occur in your world and how you're sort of preset to receive them and interpret them. And that has to do with the personality model that I think I mentioned to you called the Enneagram. And that is something that I can talk to you more about afterwards. And I have a book on it as well at the back table.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how hard would it be to change someone's personality?
Do you mean your own?
My own.
Okay, so I was going to say, let's not try to change anyone else's because that doesn't work, believe me, because I've tried. That's a losing game. So I can tell you that it depends on your determination. Okay, you don't have to have a college degree. It's not anything like that. It's just how willing are you to do the work, And as I said, this is daily work. It's not easy because, Rome was not built in a day, and nor is it unbuilt in a day. It takes a lot of work and attention to really start to excavate, like I said, I just think of that picture of archaeologists and how, or paleontologists too, and how when they find something, they find an artifact, the big shovels go away and you pull out the little tiny picks and the tiny brushes. You really pay attention and continue that digging because you want the treasure that's down there. So if you'll just, start off by doing these 3 things every day, that will help you on your way. Yeah.
Thank you. Give her a hand.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.